I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to come and speak with you today. I wanted to talk about three things this morning: our new Premier in Ontario, my priorities for the upcoming session, and opportunities for our region going forward. As we are all aware, we have a new Premier in Ontario, Kathleen Wynne. But her being new to the Liberal helm does not absolve her from the failures of the last 8 years, the failures of the McGuinty government. She can't whitewash the years of neglect of Northern Ontario because she was at the table and she was part of the decision-making process. And we do need her to take immediate action to prove that she's sincere in providing meaningful assistance to Northerners. We all need to be committed to working together if we are to make this government work for the people who sent us here. And I plan on continuing to work with individuals on all sides to deliver results. And we have examples that it can be done. In this last session, we had Bill 8, which is the Ontario Underground Infrastructure Act, and it showed that it was possible for all sides to work together. But in that case, McGuinty used unilateral powers to deny the will of the Democratic majority. He used the same tactics on other bills that we got together and we passed, and motions such as those that would take the HST off home heating and create a Northern Committee for MPPs to deal with all bills before the House that would impact Northern Ontario, just to name a couple. So in that sense, I'm going to say that the Liberal grace period is over. It is now up to Wynne to show actual leadership and work with us to build consensus and make meaningful changes that will deliver jobs and prosperity to the North and all across Ontario. And as for my priorities, they haven't changed. I will continue to fight for fairness for the North, and I have many issues that I plan on bringing forward this session. And I'm going to name some of the issues. They include economic development and support for our mining, forest, and tourism industries, ensuring that our highways are safe to travel on during winter months. I've heard a number of issues from one end of this riding to the other about the conditions of the roads. And I know that it has been a particularly cold winter, it's been a difficult winter, but roads still need to be maintained in all conditions, and that's just not happening. I'm going to be pushing for equitable access to healthcare services in all of our communities across the region. It shouldn't matter where we live, we all deserve access to healthcare. I'm going to be fighting the cuts to Service Ontario, as well as the Ministry of Natural Resources. They're very important ministries, the Ministry of Government Services and Natural Resources. I'm going to be fighting the downloading of costs onto municipalities and pushing for a sustained infrastructure funding that will allow municipal leaders to plan ahead to meet their needs, rather than incurring large amounts of debt or relying on one-time funding. That's something that I've heard time and time again from municipal leaders. The $98 million Provincial Municipal Infrastructure Investment Initiative, MIII, spread out over 3 years just doesn't cut it, and that's something I've heard from you as well. I'm going to be fighting to ensure that Northerners have a real voice at the table, and I'm going to be fighting for that all-party Northern Committee that McGuinty refused to create. I'm going to continue to fight for affordable hydro bills, and I'm going to continue to press the provincial government to hold the federal government accountable and to continue to operate the experimental lakes area. The fact is that the two levels of government have entered into a bilateral agreement many years ago over the ELA, which prohibits the federal government from simply walking away until it has satisfied its obligations, and that hasn't happened. And my angle is simply that it would cost the federal government a whole lot less money to continue to operate the ELA than it would be for them to pay to restore the lakes to pristine condition. If you look at it from whether it's an environmental, a scientific perspective, or even an economic perspective, it just doesn't make sense to stop that program. And I will continue to push the governments to enter into meaningful and fruitful consultations with First Nations. Projects such as the Ring of Fire, the twinning of Highway 17, and others have been needlessly delayed because the government has failed to sincerely engage with First Nations. I shouldn't have to remind you that it was the Ministry of Aboriginal Affairs that failed to live up to its duty to facilitate these talks between First Nations. Premier Designate Wynne was most recently the minister responsible for Aboriginal affairs before she stepped down and ran for the leader. And we all know, we will know, I should say, in very short order, if these failures are due to McGuinty's contempt for Northern Ontario or her own complacency. Which in turn brings me to my last point. As Northerners, we have been ignored for too long, and if we are to expect change, we need to start with ourselves. We have a number of mining, forestry, and tourism projects that are currently underway. I'm happy to hear that the forestry industry is rebounding. We are hearing all sorts of examples of mining opportunities that are either, as I said, currently underway or are beginning to happen right now. We have a bunch of opportunities on the horizon, and I don't need to tell you that. But what warrants emphasizing is that it is up to those of us in this room if we want the North to be successful. Political and business success alike are both predicated on solid relationships. And in our case, that means solid relationships with people in this room and other communities, and also our First Nation neighbors. Communities like Thunder Bay have recognized that we aren't all that different and that we basically want the same things. We are all struggling in Northern Ontario. We are all tired of being ignored by governments. And we all want a stronger economy and greater prosperity in our communities. If we work together, not only will we benefit individually as communities with each project, but we will also benefit collectively. We have an area that is too vast and too sparsely populated to go at it alone. If we speak out as individual, self-interested entities, we are easy to ignore. But if, on the other hand, we choose to work together and speak out in a single collective voice, not only will the provincial and federal governments hear our message, but we will all be stronger as a region. So that's one of the biggest messages I wanted to give to you today, and I thank you for the time to speak to you.